Hi, welcome to the video training of what is research, what is the IRB, and how does it relate to me? This video is presented on behalf of the Holy Family University Institutional Review Board. The purpose of this video today is to offer viewers a better understanding of what constitutes research. So research has many different purposes. It can offer new ideas about new techniques, or through exploratory studies, give researchers new ideas in a certain field. Many areas within psychology and counseling and science and social sciences, as well as education and other fields, use research to promote new ideas, to validate existing ones, and to offer information about what best practices might be in various fields. So they can present new ideas, new techniques, validate theory, validate different approaches, as well as practices. So those are some of the reasons why people might engage in research. The process of research is pretty straightforward. Most people develop a question. Perhaps there's something they are curious about, and so they develop a research question that they want to explore. Then the next step is to investigate what has already been researched on that or published on that topic. So for instance, if somebody were interested in looking at best practices for children with disabilities, they would go to the research databases or journal articles and find the most current information on what seems to work with that population. The next step is to establish a rationale for your research that's based on this literature. So after an extensive literature review, where you're reading a bunch of articles and seeing what has already been done, then you figure out, how am I going to conduct my study? So the next step is then to design your study, including how you're going to collect data, with whom you're going to collect data, and how you're going to analyze it. The last step in research is to state your conclusions about what you found. So, in a nutshell, research has a many-step process to it, and the best research comes about through thoughtful planning and careful planning. Who conducts research at a university? Well, research is probably being conducted in any given day at any university. Administrators, faculty, students, all may conduct research at some point at a university. But the differences exist in terms of for what purpose is that research being conducted. So, what is the IRB? The IRB actually stands for the Institutional Review Board. And this is a committee at the university or a hospital or other entity that is responsible for protecting human participants. So this body oversees and reviews any and all research that is being conducted at the university by university staff, university students or administration, or from people outside the university who might be wanting to access our faculty, administration, or students. So this body oversees all the research that could potentially happen at the university and make sure that no one that would participate in research would actually be harmed. So some of the different purposes, again, for why people at a university would do research, one of them might be classroom teaching activities. So teachers who are teaching research methods courses may want to employ data collection or research-like activities in order to help students learn about the process. There may be university-focused activities looking at how students are doing at the university. And then another reason why other people at the university would do research would be for professional development purposes. And we're going to look next at faculty research. So why is it that faculty would do research? Well, they want to contribute new knowledge to their areas of discipline. They're looking to publish information, either in a professional newsletter, a journal, a book, or something similar. Or they want to present their results in some public forum, for instance, at a professional conference, a seminar, or something like that. So for faculty research, people who already are established in their field, who are teaching at a university, most likely have a PhD or a PsyD or their doctoral level degree. What is the IRB's role in that faculty member's research? Again, the purpose of the IRB is to ensure that any and all research conducted by faculty that involves human participants follows the federal guidelines for the protection of those participants. So the federal government has established guidelines that anyone doing research with humans, they must follow. Some of these guidelines include protecting people's identities. So for instance, there's a difference between anonymous research versus confidential research. So if a faculty member wanted to gain information from participants, they could do it in a couple of different ways. For one, they could do it without collecting any identifying information or names or things that would potentially identify someone. That's anonymous research. Confidential research is research where perhaps there are identifying characteristics that will be recorded or that are important to the study. So faculty need to understand the difference between anonymous and confidential. And these federal guidelines dictate that if a study is actually going to be confidential, that they need to have protections in place so that participants' identities aren't going to be found by people who don't really need to know them. Some of the procedural issues that the IRB examines include how consent forms are handled and where they are kept. There is a federal guideline that says any signed consent form that a participant might sign agreeing to participate in a study, that form needs to be kept separate from any complete questionnaires. The second reason, or second procedure that needs to be considered is making sure that all participants have access to support services should they need them following their participation. For instance, sometimes there are studies where participants might feel some emotional distress or upset as a result of their participation. Part of the informed consent process is to allow that participant to know where they can go to get help if they need it. The second thing that the IRB does is they determine what level of review is required for each project. There are 3 levels of review. Full review, which means everybody on the IRB committee must review the project before it is approved. Expedited review, which means that at least 2 people from the IRB committee need to review it. Or the exempt review, which indicates that mainly one person, mainly the chair of the IRB, would be reviewing that proposal. So exempt does not mean exempt from any and all review. It only means that one person will be reviewing that project. Reasons why full review would be needed include working with vulnerable populations such as children, people with developmental disabilities, or people who have already lost some of their rights, perhaps prison populations or things of that nature. In which case the IRB's role is to really make sure that those kinds of participants are protected as best as they can be. So what is the process? Well, faculty need to download the application from the IRB information on the website. And I'm going to show you what those forms look like. So there's a standard application form. And on this form need to be original signatures. So in addition to the faculty member actually doing the study, there are positions for deans or academic chairs, program chairs to sign off, so that way everybody knows what research is being conducted within any given department. There's also an ethics form that any faculty doing research need to complete. So there's 2 different options for this training, this human subjects certification. The option 1 is a certification video that is available in the Office of Academic Affairs. The second option, which most people choose to do, is an online tutorial and certification. So by following this link, it takes you to the home page for NIH. There you will create your own unique password and username. So that way if you need to start the process and come back to it later on, you can, and it saves the information that you've already entered. Once you complete the certification, there will be an actual certificate that shows up on the screen that you can then print out. This will need to be submitted with all of the other IRB forms. This certificate is also good for 2 to 3 years. So if the research is going to be ongoing, then it is on faculty to remember when their certification might need to be renewed. So once application forms are complete, then the faculty will submit this application to the IRB chair. At that point, the IRB chair determines what level of review is required, and if it's an exempt review, then the IRB chair will review it, him or herself, and proceed accordingly. If another level of review is required, the IRB chair will determine that and then distribute to the appropriate people the submitted application. Once the review is complete, the IRB chair notifies the faculty member of their decision, and if there are any changes or suggestions that are being made in order to further protect human subjects. If at any time a faculty member is engaging in research and they decide to add another assessment tool or perhaps another group of participants or another data collection site, those kinds of changes would need to be approved prior to implementation. That way, again, the IRB can ensure that any of these new potential participants or any new assessment tools are appropriate and that all protections are in place. Now let's look at student research. The information on this slide is meant for students who are going to be presenting, such as at the SEPSHE conference or other kinds of conferences, or potentially publishing their work. We'll get to class-related activities later on. So what is the purpose of student research? Well, it's pretty much the same as faculty research, so contributing new knowledge to the field, developing new ideas, and seeing how they work. So the same reasons why faculty conduct research, students would also be conducting research. With the new graduate level and doctoral level programs here at the university, students' dissertations are probably going to involve new ideas that they will be researching. What is the IRB's role in student research? It is exactly the same as with faculty research. So ensuring that human participants that would potentially be involved in any project are protected and afforded the safety and security of their identity and other federal guidelines as outlined. What is the process? Students first submit their proposal to their faculty member. Chances are they are working alongside an academic advisor or a dissertation chair or somebody of that serving in that role, or they submit it through their instructor for review and approval. Hopefully at this point, any protections that might be violated would be caught, and then the student could revise their projects appropriately. Once all signatures have been obtained, students submit their completed proposal to the IRB chair. Again, the IRB chair determines the level of review required and proceeds accordingly. The IRB chair then informs the student researcher of the outcome of that review and will give them an actual approval letter if the project is approved. Similar to faculty members, if any changes are made, students must submit those changes to the IRB before implementing any of those changes. Now let's talk about faculty that might be teaching research methods courses. Most of the time, in research methods-based courses, faculty want students to learn about the research process, the data collection process, the data analysis process. So some of the purposes of these projects and classes are to demonstrate those things. The IRB's role is not to do a formal review, as we've discussed previously in this video. Instead, the IRB still wants to ensure the protection of human participants, but mainly to serve as a sounding board for those faculty when projects present potential violations. So the process for these kinds of situations are that, again, the faculty should complete the ethics certification as discussed previously. Faculty should also require students to complete this certification as well. It's a very good learning exercise, and if faculty choose to do this, they should keep copies of those certificates for the duration of the course. So that way, if there's any question about any project, students can show that, yes, they did indeed complete the ethics certification. Faculty working with students, as these ideas for projects are being developed, should from their own understanding of ethics and research, be able to guide students fairly well in avoiding violations of federal guidelines. Faculty should submit a list of project ideas as soon as the students decide on them. So typically at the beginning of a semester in these research methods kinds of courses, students are trying to figure out what they want to focus on for their research project. Once those students have made those decisions and have developed their research question and their procedures for how they're going to carry out their project, these ideas should be submitted from the faculty member to the IRB chair. So that way the IRB is aware of any and all research activities that students might be engaging in. When necessary, the IRB will communicate any required changes to the faculty, and then the faculty are required to share them with the students. And this is prior to any kind of data collection process. Then the IRB can serve as any further support, if needed, to the faculty as they're supervising these student projects. If at any point in time a student decides that they really do want to present or really do want to try to publish their projects, they must go through the formal IRB process. So again, there are two separate processes. One, for those projects that people know, either faculty or students, that they want to publish them or present them, those need formal IRB review. For students or faculty that are looking at doing research methods, kinds of course-related activities, that does not need formal IRB review, and students do not need to go through the whole application process. Instead, the ensuring of the protection of human participants will happen mainly from that faculty member, and then the IRB serves as a secondary review on those projects. Let's talk about things potentially to avoid in these student projects. Again, what I'm talking about here is solely for classroom learning activities, not for anything that is going to be presented or potentially published. So students, as they're developing their ideas in these research methods courses, should avoid unnecessarily intrusive or sensitive questions. For instance, have you ever been the victim of rape? How many times have you engaged in unprotected sexual behavior in the last month? Or how many times have you driven drunk in the past month? These are all examples of questions that have come up from student research projects. Now, while very interesting, and I'm sure the data would lead to a very good project, the problem is that these kinds of questions, along with the procedures of where these students would be asking these questions, present some potential violations of the federal guidelines. So faculty should be working alongside students to change their ideas for these projects to be less intrusive in nature. Again, the purpose is not to further the field in these projects. The purpose is classroom learning. Therefore, students can get that learning by asking less sensitive kinds of questions, and that is the IRB's recommendation. Procedures that leave participants' personal answers and information vulnerable to privacy violations also need to be considered. So asking participants to complete questionnaires in a public place where others can see their answers. For instance, here at Holy Family University, looking at collecting data over in the cafeteria during lunchtime when lots of other students are around and could potentially see answers. So we encourage students to really think through where and how they will actually collect their data, in addition to what questions they ask. Another potential violation of privacy is collecting surveys in small numbers where the identity of participants might be known. Not separating signed and formed consent forms from completed questionnaires. So again, this goes back to the discussion about anonymous versus confidential. Now for these student projects, we hope that students would protect their participants' identities as much as possible, even though it's not formal research. So once the informed consent forms are signed, they should be kept separate at all times for any completed questionnaires. Another potential violation of privacy exists when students, as part of their projects, collect academically related information from other students. For instance, specifically asking for GPA, when what might potentially be better would be to ask for a range of GPA and have students indicate on a line a different range for their GPA. Other things that potentially leave participants' welfare in question include incomplete informed consent procedures, meaning within their informed consent document, there's no mention of foreseeable risks or potential benefits. A good informed consent process is one that is not only done in a written format that somebody signs, but also in a verbal format. So really, students should be getting practice explaining what the purpose of their research study is to their potential participants, and then also asking for a more formal signature of approval. Another potential issue about participants' welfare is using participants who have no way of accessing support, counseling, things of that nature, as outlined in the informed consent document. So students will see, based on the informed consent template that's up on the university website, examples of how to word access to support, foreseeable risks and benefits, and things of that nature. So for students to go and try to solicit participation from random people wandering in the mall may not necessarily be the best place to have students go and collect data, simply because they have no way of offering support to those participants because they are not members here at the university, either faculty, administration, students, staff. So students should be very aware of their procedures and where they're going to collect their data. Here are some examples of possible alternatives that students can use. Students can choose topics that are relevant to the field without being intrusive. So they can still get the practice of collecting data, entering data, and analyzing it by asking about things like, book genre preferences, how often they use technology or how many friends they have on Facebook, preferences for class times, or any topic that does not impinge on the welfare of others. Again, rather than asking for a specific GPA, ask students to indicate what range their GPA falls in. Students can also make up their data. This is a much harder process, requires more critical thinking about which analysis and what their data might look like. So students can use the established literature to guide them as they think about the population they want to study and the questionnaires they want to use. Knowing these things, students can make up or enter fictitious data into SPSS or some other similar kind of software program that might resemble data they could collect from real participants. So for instance, let's say students wanted to investigate the link between depression and number of friends on Facebook. So instead of actually asking people to complete questionnaires on depression, they can choose a depression inventory that has been cited quite frequently in the literature, and then look at what the range of scores might be for that particular assessment tool, and then enter the data accordingly into SPSS as if people were actually filling out the questionnaire. This can also teach more about how researchers can bias or impact their own results. So there's potential for good learning that could happen by having students make up their own data. Instructors can also choose to provide fake data sets for students to analyze. So perhaps instructors can go in and make up different kinds of data sets and share them with other people teaching research methods courses. There are also data sets available through government agencies. For instance, the U.S. Census Bureau has some public data sets that are available, and faculty can use those kinds of data sets in these activities. So if you have any further questions or need further information, you can contact the IRB chair, and that is Anna Maria Catanzaro, and her email address is acatanzaro@holyfamily.edu. You can also access information on the Institutional Review Board through the Holy Family intranet, or also through the quick links off of the Holy Family homepage. Then scroll to IRB. So again, this is meant to be a beginning training video on research, as well as the process and how the IRB plays a role in that. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact any member of the IRB. Thank you.